Welcome to AUA Leadership in Business, an official podcast of the American Urological Association. This episode was made possible by support from Urovant.
Good afternoon. My name is Raman, and I'm professor of urology at Penn State Health and chair of the AUA's Office of Education. It's my pleasure to welcome you to another one of our educational podcasts with this specific episode titled Advancing Women in Urology Mentorship. Joining me today are Drs. Suskind and Stacy Tanaka. And what we hope to convey to our audience and what we hope our audience will appreciate from this series is this is the Advancing Women in Urology podcast series, which seeks to elevate awareness and provide content that focuses on career tips, advancement, and education featuring women leaders in all areas of urology. As I mentioned, my two guests are Dr. Suskind. Dr. Suskind is Vice Chair and Associate Professor of Urology at the UCSF School of Medicine, and she's also the Associate Chair of Academic Affairs and Wellness. She serves on the Executive Board of the Society of Women in Urology, as well as being an Associate Editor for Neurourology and Urodynamics, Journal of Urology, and on the Editorial Board for Urology Practice. Dr. Stacy Tanaka is Professor and Chief of Pediatric Urology at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. She's the Assistant Editor for the Pediatric section of the Journal of Urology and serves on the Editorial Board for the AUA Update series. So, Stacy, first of all, thanks so much for joining me on this really important, I think, initiative from the AUA to sort of improve the awareness and the knowledge of our members on this really important domain in urology. So thank you both.
I'm thrilled to be here and to chat on this topic with the two of you.
No, and thank you for starting this conversation.
So maybe we'll just start off and talk a little bit, and I'll open it up to either of you, frankly, but maybe tell me a little bit about the concept of maybe some of the terms that we're going to be using today: mentor, mentee, and then maybe a little bit distinguishing that from maybe a sponsor or sponsorship and a coach. So maybe just start with that, and we'll maybe talk in greater detail about some of these afterwards.
Well, I can take that if you want, Stacy, but traditionally I think of mentorship as there's sort of a career incumbent who is imparting their knowledge and advice on somebody who's less advanced in the field. And so that's on one end of the spectrum. And on the other end of the spectrum, I think of coaching, which is there's somebody who may be in the field or not in the field, and they're not giving advice or any really direction, but they're helping the individual that they're coaching kind of come up with their own solutions and answers and path. And I really see kind of mentorship as that spectrum in a way between, traditional definitions of mentorship and coaching. And I think it's important that the mentor sort of adjusts where they are, how much advice they're giving versus how much they're sort of trying to elicit the individual to kind of come up with their own ideas and paths, and really tailoring that to each person and where they are, both in their career trajectory and also where they are with, the particular topic that you're talking about. Sponsorship is something completely separate. Sponsorship is where there's a more senior physician in this case who uses their social or political clout or experience to nominate people or sort of help them to advance their careers or join prestigious groups or things along those lines.
And I think I'd like to add on to that too. I think for a mentor-mentee relationship, it's a longitudinal relationship. The mentor and mentee really can have a lot of back and forth, a lot of open discussion about things to help the mentee establish their individual goals. I think in contrast, what you don't want from a mentor necessarily is or as a mentor is you're not trying to create a mini me. Really, your mentee's goals are different. Those are your mentee's goals. They're not the mentor's goals. There may be some overlap with that, but it's important that the mentee has their own individual goals and the mentor helps develop those.
Absolutely. And kind of to go on that, the mentor is setting up the mentee for complete independence, right? And helping them to get there by whatever method.
So, Anne, you talked about coaching. So, and maybe I would ask both of you. So, is a mentor a coach? Can someone coach you and not be a mentor? Like, maybe tie in how this sort of concept of coaching works with mentorship, or are they not necessarily one and the same?
I think it depends on how you define it. And I kind of shared how I define it as sort of a spectrum. I think there are coaches who would say they're not mentors, and there are mentors who would say they're not coaches. So, a little bit of it is semantics, but I think whatever you're doing, if it's mentorship or coaching, I think the ideal is to meet the person where they are and to help give them what they need in that particular situation. So in a way, the terms don't matter. It's more the relationship and the type of interaction. That's my opinion.
And I think of coaching as someone who might not necessarily be in urology, who's just helping you with decision making. Where I think of a mentor traditionally, I think is someone who knows your field or is in a similar field as you.
Yeah. So the mentors basically giving using their experience, and the coach is using other sets of tools usually.
So when you talk about mentors, maybe talk to me a little bit about who are these array of persons? Is it a single person? Is it multiple person? Is it a team of mentors? Stacy, you alluded to, mentors maybe in your specialty. Could there be mentors that are outside of your specialty? Maybe just the sort of the broad concept of who are these mentors and what is a mentorship team?
So I think absolutely. I think, I think when I first thought of a mentor, I thought of one singular mentor, but I think really you benefit from mentorship from a lot of different people. And that can be people who are senior to you. That can be from people who are really your people who are at your same career level, people in other disciplines. And so I think you can really get mentorship through a lot of different paths. I think one of the ways, surprisingly, that I benefited from mentorship is from a group of friends who are all pediatric urologists, but we jokingly call ourselves like the circle of trust. They're this group of people who, are about your same career level that you can go to with really any problem you have, whether it's a clinical problem, whether it's a hospital problem, because they know that space. And so they're very familiar with it at that level.
I think this concept of mentorship as a team, having a team of mentors is so important. And I think of it like friends. You have lots of different friends who you have different relationships with and get different things from. Some friends you like to go out to dinner with or do things with. Some you go to for advice. Some are there to support you. I mean, it's the same with mentors. You don't get everything from one person. It's impossible, right? And so it's so much more effective to design a team of mentors where there are different people that you go to for different needs and different things. But that being said, I think it's really important to have, particularly early on in your career, when you're building your career, one main mentor who knows that they're your main mentor and is sort of helping you to build the team and orchestrate things and put everything together and synthesize things. And then you have lots of co-mentors. So maybe there's a research project that you're interested in and they have a certain, specialty that is helpful to you, or a career development thing or leadership activity. I mean, lots of different things. And then like Stacy was saying, it's so important to have peer mentors. And those are, people who have been invaluable in my life, people who are going through what you've gone through and, are about your same age, or maybe you trained together and you can ask them questions that you might be embarrassed to ask other people. And then the other thing is, I think it's really important that your mentorship team evolves over time as you evolve. So the mentors that you start out with, as your initial kind of team, they may not serve you 5, 10, 15, 20 years into practice as your interests change and your needs change. And I think it's okay to complete certain relationships in a way and develop new relationships based on your interests. And I think that's really important to keep people engaged and interested throughout the career span.
I love your analogy of like developing mentors as sort of having a team of friends, a team of mentors, because I think a lot of times you don't know who's going to be like, you meet a lot of people, and some people end up being acquaintances and some people end up being like your closest friends. And you don't know that when you first meet them. And I think it's the same thing for meeting mentors as well. When you first meet someone, you might not realize, oh, this person is going to be my mentor, but then you have a longitudinal relationship with them and they evolve into being your mentor. And I think several of my mentors, especially later on in my career, were people that, I knew that I was acquaintances with, but I think became very helpful the longer I knew them and felt more comfortable asking them questions about things.
Yeah.
So when do you think, it's interesting, I can't remember which one of you mentioned it, but we've talked a lot about mentorship in the setting of your career development and your career advancement. And I guess my question for you is when should mentorship start? So should it start when you're a resident, when you are, you graduated medical school, you're going into this field, you don't know much about urology at all? Or is it more formative when you have completed some of your training, you know what you're looking for, and now you're sort of trying to build a career? Or maybe your thoughts on that question.
I think it's different at different times. And I think, everyone has sort of informal mentorship when you're a medical student. Like there are definitely like junior residents who had just been through that process, who essentially served as mentors for applying to residency. And I think as you go through, there's always someone just right above that serves as a mentor. So I think you don't necessarily have to name someone as a mentor. I think you can get mentorship from a lot of people. Jay, are you kind of asking like answering the question, who is my mentor, and being able to write that person down? Is that like a...
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking to myself just a little bit that, this process has to start at some point, and it almost intuitively seems to me sooner is probably better. I mean, to your point, maybe you didn't need to have a formal mentor assigned, or maybe you do, but it seems like this, residents are part of sort of the continuum of, that's a real job, right? It's a real job. It's part of your career path. And I've started to wonder to myself more whether there needs to be more of an investment, not just in wellness for residents, but what's your mentorship, what's your career path, what do you want to do with your life, whether it be and other elements of work-life balance, and then that sort of hopefully feeds into subsequent sort of practice when you're done with your training.
I think there's no wrong time to have a mentor. I think any part of your life, even before you go to medical school, you can have mentors. And that being said, even when we're in medicine, not all of our mentors need to be medical people. They can be from any, area of our lives. And I think that kind of adds to the fullness of the experience as well. And yeah, I'll just stop there for a minute.
So you both at this point in your careers have probably both been mentees earlier and now probably serve as mentors now. And I can't remember which one of you said it, but I love the fact that somebody said, as a mentor, you don't want your mentee to be a mini-me. So that kind of leads me to the broad question of, how do you identify a good relationship, like a good relationship, and what should mentors be looking for, and what should mentees be looking for to have a sort of synergistic relationship?
So I think I was thinking about this, like what makes a good mentee. And I think that you have to at least have some basis of what your goals are. And you might not be able to have the specific details of what those are, but I think it's hard to mentor someone who says, can you be my mentor? And you don't have any sort of direction that you're going in. I think that as a mentee, I think you can learn not everyone you're going to interact with as a mentor, but you can still learn from everyone. You can still use that learning to kind of direct what your goals are. So, like, let's say as a resident, you're working with a faculty person and you say, oh, I don't want my practice to be anything like that person's. I mean, that's a learning point. You're still learning. And so I think just having that rough idea of what your goals are, and those goals can change, they don't have to be permanent, but just to go in with at least with that set of goals to work with.
There's one article that I like to quote from UCSF, where there's this UCSF Mentorship Award, and each award nomination had 10 letters of recommendation within. They took all the nominations and all letters of recommendation and put them into thematic categories of what good qualities of good mentors, and they came out with 5, which were good mentors had admirable personal qualities. They serve as a career guide. They make strong time commitments. I think time is central. They support professional and personal balance, and they leave a legacy of how to be a good mentor. So that's kind of where I start. And then I like to add, a good mentor doesn't need to be someone who's well-known or famous in the field. In fact, I think a lot of times those people don't have the time to put into to mentorship. And, it doesn't matter if they're well-known. What matters is the relationship and what's put in from both sides. The other thing I'd add is it can be really tricky, and I recommend against having your mentor be your boss or your direct report. And not to say that can't happen, but if it does happen, I think you just need to kind of be aware of maybe there are certain things that person can't mentor you on. And that's a role for some strong co-mentorship and things along those lines. And for mentees, I think it's really, I think I always kind of talk to mentees about, I think it's important that the mentee drives the relationship and sort of energizes the relationship, and the mentor will mirror kind of the amount that the mentee puts in. I think that along those lines, I think it's important for the mentee to kind of check in with the mentor and update them and keep them posted on what's going on. And mentors, I always tell mentees, your mentors love to hear from you, right? And there's nothing better than hearing how people are doing. And I think expectations are really important in both directions. And I think that conversation doesn't happen nearly enough. And kind of to our conversation earlier about kind of having someone be a formal mentor or not, I think a lot of times people think they're in a mentee-mentor relationship and the other party doesn't know that. And so I think there is something powerful about declaring that so that both sides understand what the other person wants out of them, right? I think a lot of mentees assume that if they're having a lot of conversations with someone that person knows that they're their primary mentor, but I tell you, a lot of times that's not the case. And I think if that person knew that they were the primary mentor, they would be able to give so much more, or a whole other level of support. So I think that's often a missed opportunity. I think mentees, it's always great to be enthusiastic and energized and organized and focused and set up meetings and be fun to work with. And I think it's important to be able to embrace feedback and to welcome feedback. It's really hard to give feedback, as you all know, and but feedback is so precious and can be so helpful. And if you, as a mentee, ask for feedback and really try not to be defensive about receiving it, there's so many gifts there. So those are just a few things I think of.
I love what Ann said. Jay, cut out my part from before. I'm serious. But I think it's so important. The part that you said about not having your mentor be a direct report, I think that's, I agree, there's a lot of caution there, because I think there's a tendency for a lot of mentees to present their perfect selves. And that's not what you want to present to your mentor. You want to present your real self. And I think it's hard with someone that's a direct report saying, okay, these are the things that I'm struggling with, or I didn't like doing this. Can I reshift to something else? And so I think it's harder to have that honesty if your mentor is also someone who you're directly reporting to.
Yeah.
So I want to maybe turn our focus to sort of the question of women in urology. And and you both know the demographics as well as I do, which is, I think right now, if you look at current trainees and those entering the workforce, I think we're doing a much better job if you just look at gender equity of who's coming into our specialty. But then certainly as you look at the life cycle of urologists, right, as you go further and further into the career, the proportion of women that are mid-career is certainly lower than those that are currently earlier career. And then if you go to sort of those that are late career, or you're getting to relatively small numbers, like, under 10%. And one of the things when we did a needs assessment survey, which I think you've both seen with the AUA, was there's a real challenge with mid-career women urologists with identifying mentors. So, and accessing mentors. And it was actually a very strikingly high number. And it was sort of eye-opening that, wow, here's a large group of persons who actually are saying that this is a real deficiency. So I guess I want to sort of use that as a framework to maybe pick both your brains on, women physicians in urology and accessing and identifying mentors. And do all mentors need to be women or men? And how to sort of solve the conundrum of, you may not have enough women that are seniors, for example, who could be adequate mentors for all the persons that are entering the field. So that was a big preamble, but I'll turn it over to both of you now.
I think there's a lot of creative ways to think about that. One is your mentors don't need to be in your department. And certainly I have my two kind of main mentors throughout my career as an attending have been a colorectal surgeon and a geriatrician who are both women. And they both happen to be women, but that's been really helpful to me. And, and you can even think outside of your institution, I think. So across departments, across institutions, look at professional societies. I serve on the board of SWU, the Society of Women in Urology, and that's a great kind of avenue for meeting other women. We have a mentorship conference every year. It's coming up in January. And really one of the main goals and objectives of that conference is to get women together to form mentorship type of connections. So I would say think creatively about that. And no, your mentors do not have to be women if you're a woman. That there's excellent mentorship regardless of gender or across any different lines. I think it's helpful if at least one of your mentors is like you, and in whatever regard that is, I think that can offer you certain help and support in special ways. But I would just encourage women and other people from minority groups of any sort to think about it more creatively and more broadly as well.
And I think that, again, mentors you can find in a lot of different places. You don't necessarily need to think, okay, I need to find someone in my subspecialty of urology. Going to meetings like SWU or other meetings where you have mentors outside of your institution, I think are so important, because I think they're able to give an outside perspective of what's going on. And so that's helpful. I think within your department, you may be limited by the number of women in your department or the number of women that you're directly interacting with. And so your mentor in your department might not necessarily be a woman. And I think that's okay. I think most of my mentors haven't been women, just generationally, because that's been how things were, people who were later in their career. But I think what was helpful to me in that regard is just having some informal downtime to be able to talk. And so in addition to having that, okay, this is my mentor, we're going to meet at this time, just having like neighboring OR rooms and going into the other OR and just like having that sort of back and forth, or having offices on the same hallway so that you can develop that relationship. So for someone who might not be a mentor to become a mentor. and figuring out who's going to be the best mentor for you. And I think that's especially important at the mid-career level, because I think at that level, I think your needs from a mentor are going to be pretty specific.
Mm-hmm.
So what you've both talked about a little bit is a lot of stuff that's being independently driven by the mentee, right? For example, if you want to go to SWU, it's seeking out those connections. So I'm going to turn it around the other way and say, okay, I'm a department chair. I have 5 or 6 women in my department. So what should I be doing at an institutional level so that I'm helping that, right? So that the onus is not just on, and we could say whether it's women or race or ethnicity, but what should we be doing institutionally and leaders at institutions to make it a little bit easier so the onus isn't just on the mentee to do the entire walk here and make that happen?
Well, one thing we've done is develop formal mentorship programs for our department, and I've been able to run those programs. And so we've really started by focusing on our most junior faculty. And so, I meet with everybody regularly, help them to develop their teams, and kind of help them along with whatever barriers or needs come up. So I think just having something in place that's formalized, that's available to everyone, and then we've widened it to the whole department, but that's available to everyone, and is one thing that you can do. Another thing that department chairs or administrations can do is really value mentorship in terms of promotion, whether it's with honoring, there's different ways to do it, but providing FTE or some sort of reimbursement or some sort of other value that's the system that's used or recognition system that's used in your department. Because what often happens is mentorship, it takes time, it takes effort, and it goes unappreciated or unnoticed or unvalued. But really, it's the life force of your department, because there's nothing more important than nurturing, fostering, and growing your faculty and making sure that people are happy and fulfilled and have the careers that they want. And that will make them much more productive and long lasting in their careers and in your department. So I think it's the right thing and an important thing to do.
And I think that's so important. And because I think coming in as a young faculty member, everyone's, super excited. They want to, you joined a department, you want to be productive. But I think it's really easy to spin your wheels a little bit, that you have your goals, but it's hard to know how to get there. You have to know what those little mini steps are to get there. And knowing what those mini steps are, it's easy to know, kind of look at it in retrospect, but it's hard to know in the moment what's the next thing I should be doing to advance, or what's my next big project. And I think that's where the mentorship is really helpful. And it's a waste for someone to have all this energy, but just kind of spin in place and not progress. And that's why, and just like Ann said, I think mentorship needs to be recognized as important as it is, given all these sort of competing demands, because I don't think it's recognized as much as it should be.
I think you both raised such good points, which is, I think we would all agree that when you have a junior faculty member, the last thing you want them to see them do is just spin themselves in a wheel, and they're expending all this effort and this energy, and they don't have sort of a vision of where the end point is, or at least where the goal needs to be. And you highlight so well the need of a mentor there. And I would also tell you, you're spot on, right? If you look at, how we value people from a faculty perspective, and you look at like the dollars and cents, right? It's how many cases did you do? All right, what is your FTE that you got from this grant? It's point whatever. All right, you're the vice chair of whatever, so you get point this. And there is nothing, unfortunately, in many places that is for mentorship. And so, and the problem with that is, there's only so much volunteerism, right? It takes time, it takes effort, you have to do it well. And if you do it well, it's going to be some amount of time that needs to be captured more so than a pat on the back and, hey, thanks for spending 4 or 5 hours being a good mentor. So I think you both raise really excellent excellent points there. When you look at as a mentee, what should mentees be looking for with regards to who might be a good mentor for them? Is it, and how do they identify this person? So you've highlighted a number of different avenues. Probably your direct supervisor is not ideal. You've talked about people within your institution, outside your institutional, national organizations like SWU. Any tips on how do you dip your feet into this pool, right? So I mean, how do you get started, and what are some tips for getting started in this? Because I'm sure it's a fairly daunting venture, frankly, if it's not right in front of you and you have an institutional framework that's readily laid out.
So I think it's a little bit like dating, in that like you sort of feel out, you sort of like approach someone with a specific question that is not necessarily, I want you to, or will you be my mentor, but just, hey, could you give, I want your advice on this. And you can assess how timely is that person, or how interested were they in helping you with that question. And I think you can sort of gauge, okay, is this person sort of meshing with me? Does this person seem like this is a big hassle? And I think then if that seemed to work, you can go on the second date where you proceed. And because I think it's hard to say, to look at a person that you don't really know just by reputation and say, I want this person to be my mentor, because you really have no idea. And I think finding a mentor is really more a process than just like, this is the person I want to be like, I want this person to be my mentor.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that you said. And I think it can be daunting. I think flattery is helpful. I think approaching someone and being like, I love what you're doing with X and I'd love to learn from you. Could we set up a time to speak for 15, 30 minutes, and that's it. No commitment beyond that, right? Test it out, see if there's kind of a mutual interest and synergy. Do you enjoy talking to this person? You want to develop relationships with people you like being around and that are fun to be with, and just see what progresses from there. And it's exactly like you said. I mean, I wouldn't approach someone and say, will you be my mentor? Just look at it as one conversation and go from there. It's an exploration.
Any final thoughts or comments from either of you in this sort of, concept and realm of mentorship, or maybe even specifically mentorship as it pertains to women in urology?
I think we've talked a lot about you can have a mentor, you can be a mentor. It's good to have a mentor at any step of your career development. And I think it's always good to be a mentee. Always be open to learning new things, no matter where you are or how advanced you are in your career. And never be afraid to kind of start new mentorship and new mentee-mentor relationships from either direction. I think wherever you are in your career, you have the opportunity to be both a mentor and a mentee, and to kind of, there's richness to both experiences.
Stacy, any final thoughts?
No, I think one thing that has been helpful for me for mentors I think what mentors also help you do is they recognize things in you that you don't see. I think a lot of us are not really, sometimes get not confident about our abilities. And I think the mentors are the ones who can help you say, no, you can do that. That's something you should consider.
Love that.
That's great. Well, Anne, Stacy, I want to thank you both so much for taking some time. I think this is a really important topic. I'm really glad that the AUA is sort of making a more concerted effort in this realm, but obviously appreciative of both of you taking some time to talk and to sort of have this conversation. And obviously you both are very, very you're outstanding thought leaders in the field. And I suspect you might be getting some emails from persons who may listen to this, querying you on some more details on mentorship. But I want to thank you both for your time in advance.
No, thank you, Jay.
This has been great. Thank you so much.
And for our audience, for any other information, please visit us at auanet.org/university. And thank you again for joining.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, make AUA Leadership in Business your go-to podcast. Subscribe today by searching AUA Leadership in Business on your favorite podcast app and enhance your leadership and business education needs.